not gonna say.
So how was Fort Myers this weekend? Did anybody do it?
Um, uh, you know, some people did okay. I talked to a lot of people that didn't do that great. They like did okay, but nothing
All
great.
right. Well, but okay is at least better than
Yeah,
nothing. I mean,
I
um,
did. Listen, I did half my business in the last hour.
isn't that exciting? So, how were crowds?
Lukewarm. Ask
Okay.
Annette. She's the
Hey,
superstar.
no,
Ooh.
I thought it was crowded, but I've never been there before. But it seemed like
It wasn't crowded.
it wasn't.
No,
Oh, well, I don't
And
know.
I
how was
didn't think so.
the weather?
Weather was great.
Okay. So would
Okay.
that be like is great 72 and dry? Is that great would be?
Well, it was 80 and sunny.
Oh, that sounds hot, no?
And
Well,
windy.
it was hot, but when you come from snow and 30, 25 degrees, it's not bad.
Okay.
Oh,
I
okay.
understand.
Do you ask me if I'm going back?
Are you going back?
Probably not, but here's the
Okay.
reason why.
Uh-huh.
Okay. They got rid, I didn't do it last year, and it's like it went to hell in 2 years. Meaning um there was no prize money. And the last time they did it without there weren't any prizes or prize money.
Uh-huh.
Well, first of all, when I drove up, the woman was yakking like it's a new she didn't go, oh, welcome to the show. It's a new group of running the show, blah blah blah. And I turned her off, and just went and you know because I've done it so long, I don't need them to micromanage it. So
Mm-hmm.
and that
So
wasn't my entrance anyway.
you felt that they were unfriendly upon entering, sounds like.
No, it isn't that I thought they were unfriendly, because the volunteers from before were really nice. It's just that this you drive all this way, and then you get this. It just kind of, I don't know, made me feel weird.
I
But
know.
anyway,
No, I get it. You want to hear, I mean, sometimes you get to a show and they're like, "Oh, we're so happy you're here." And
yeah,
that's what
right.
you just yeah.
Well,
Okay.
there was none of that.
All right. So now
Okay,
as far as the prize stuff, so speak to that.
let me
There
go on. Let me go on. They there used to be awards and stuff, and then you know uh the so-called breakfast. They used to have a really nice breakfast in a really nice room, and it was like upstairs in a building that the it used to be downstairs, and the downstairs was nice. There's a hotel there, and the hotel bought the building. So now the front of that was they were selling T-shirts, and the back of the building I don't was closed. It's supposed to be a restaurant. Okay.
mhm.
And it was like junk. It was junk food. I mean, it wasn't like it was. And uh, uh you know it isn't like we're giving you less, so let's lower the booth fee. No, I think they even raised the booth fee. um
So and what about the awards? There weren't any this year, is that it?
no, there weren't any.
Yeah.
There weren't
I
any, and
mean
there probably
I
will
mean
never be any.
personally, I don't care if there's awards or an event where they feed you. If the show is good,
Right. Hey, I always say I wanted to win the award for the most sales.
Well,
right?
it's just you're not understanding what I'm saying. This is the way it used to be, and this is the way it is.
I
Okay,
Okay.
know,
so
If it
Barry.
started out that way with no
Barry,
prizes, then there's
it,
no expectation.
Barry, it might be better next year because this year they had a problem with the surrounding areas.
You know what? Larry, this really bugs me. It's like everybody, like you're all
Make
making
excuses.
excuses. Don't make excuses. It's different. it's gone downhill like 99% of all his shows. You
I have a
know?
question. I have a question. Was
Yes.
there any notice about these changes?
No, of course not. Why would there be? Why would be? Look
Well,
at a lot of the.
because like I know Old Town gave a notice saying we're going to start an emerging artist program. So that's a new thing, and they told us.
I don't mind that.
So yeah,
They
but
all
I'm
have
just
emerging artists. I don't care.
well, they hadn't, and so that's why I was wondering if they told you about it. I mean,
No.
Sun Valley used to have the best breakfast ever. I mean, it was a whole the woman who ran the show, her mother was a caterer, and it was like bagels and lox, and then all
Yeah.
kinds of cakes, and everything was homemade.
Yeah.
And you know, they changed it, and it was a money thing, but they did tell us, it's nice when they can have those things, but it sounds like there wasn't the communication about it, and that you felt like you were just
More excuses. We paid for it. It was, you
oh
think when people say, "Oh, they're giving us this to us free." No, it's in the booth fee. It's planned. Every show, it's planned. They charge for, like if they have a caterer, it's X, they have X amount of people and you pay per plate, and so it's, but the booth fee wasn't lowered.
mhm.
You guys,
It just
I have a comment to make about that. I'm involved with the Michigan Guild of Artists and Artisans, and they put on several shows, mostly in Michigan. And we've seen like the cost of services go way up. Things like electricity cost more, security costs more, everything costs more, and they try not to raise
yeah.
the fees.
And where
And
do you think they should really get the money? From sponsors. That's
well,
what the best shows do.
They
It's
do.
Ann Arbor. You got all these corporations there. Knock on those doors. Listen, the hardest thing for directors and people running a show to do is to do cold calls, but that's what they have to do. Don't take the job if you're not going to do that. Listen, I'm really upset. I've been saying this for 20 years, and you know what? I stopped talking about it for 10 years because I'm the only one. It's like, what's wrong with you people? I'm the only one that's saying this, and I get criticized for complaining. No, I want it to be great for artists, the way it used to be. Sorry, this is the way it used to be. If I had just done the show the last 3 or 4 years, then I would think, oh, this is the way it is. No, it isn't the way it is. And let me tell you something. What makes the best shows the best shows? It's the sales, but it also is all, how they take care of you, and it's a total entity. If they're not taking care of you, the sales are going to go down, the quality of the artists are going to go down, the quality of the patrons are going to go down, and the sales are going to go down. And that's the way it's been.
I'm just grateful that some of these organizations made it through the pandemic, that they still have money to operate after
What about
not
us artists?
for almost 2 years.
Yeah, how about right, exactly.
So
It's any
like
different for us and them.
so
Stop
excuse me,
making
as far
excuses
as
for them. Look,
prices
I'm a
going,
professional.
excuse me, let me just, as
Yes.
far as prices going up, there's a show that I have done, Brookside Art Annual,
Yeah.
and in 2021, when there were all these rollover shows, they basically posed to the artists, if we get the everything was under a huge tent, and they said the tent is so expensive. And what they ended up doing, because we all agreed we didn't need the big tent, and then so there's no big tent, and they actually lowered booth fees. But they still give out like a sandwich for dinner, and I think the local grocery store sponsors that, and they give us water and all that. So they did actually lower the booth fee, because they no longer are getting the big tent. And so
Yeah.
it's not all shows, and it is, I mean, I don't know the story with Fort Myers, but they did just have those hurricanes, and I don't know all involved with that, but everything has gone up in price.
Mhm.
So, But you know, I mean, I understand, you know, you just want people to greet you well and all of that too.
Wait a
You
minute.
know,
I didn't hear you say, it's funny that you're talking about them. My material costs have doubled. My propane costs have doubled. Everything,
hmm
what's happened with these shows, it's happening with me too. I mean, come on.
right, right.
It's
So your
nobody's
prices
making
would
excuses for us.
your prices would go up inevitably, right?
Look at
I
we
mean,
oh, forget it.
I'm
You
not,
know,
no, I'm trying to have a conversation. I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I've never done the show. I wasn't there. I'm just saying that I'm giving you a counter of a show I did where they actually did lower the booth fee
okay.
and they took away the big tent, which they put an email out to the accepted artists saying, do you want this or not? And obviously majority um, said we don't want it. They also put out to the artists, do you want to still go until, I don't know, 9 or 10 o'clock at night? And now they're going to end the show earlier because,
Yeah.
you know, it's killer to go until 10 o'clock at night and then have to the next day go from, you know, do a 12-hour day. So, I mean, that particular show is interested in what the artists think.
You know,
Are they all that way? No, but I'm just giving you a counter. So it's not all shows.
hey, oh no, I know. We're just talking about this one. Hey, the best thing about that show, the setup and the breakdown, especially the breakdown. You got to drive right up to your booth, and they didn't have this draconian rule. Actually, I call it the Howard Allen rule, where you have to
Uh-huh.
break everything down before you put it in your vehicle, which means you have to do twice the amount of work. You could drive right up, and as you took your walls down or whatever, you could put it in your vehicle as you were breaking down. So you only had to do it once. I got it. I was still one of the last ones to get out of there, and it took it was an hour less to get out of there.
hmm Right.
you know and I have nothing. Look at I'm just showing you my frustration. I
Yeah.
love all you people. I just want you to know it has nothing to do with any of you personally. It's
It's
just,
none of this is personal. It's just a conversation.
yeah, okay.
It's all right. It's groovy.
Yeah,
Except
but
that, you
didn't
know what,
Brookside
I've been saying these things for 20 years and it's only gotten worse, and I'm old and
Brookside used to
crotchety,
charge
so
additional to be under the tent?
Right.
Really? I don't
Yes.
remember. I don't
Yep.
remember.
Yeah.
Really?
They did the year that you and I were both there. They charged additional
Oh.
to be under the
Did
tent.
Laumere did that also?
Well, Park City will charge you extra if you want to be in a specific place. So you can't just say, I'd rather be up the hill, down the hill, in the middle. They will charge extra if you want that specific. That seems that they seem a bit nickel and dimey, which I don't like. It's like just charge a booth fee and that should be enough.
I've watched the local show here in Wichita. I did, I think, 5 of the first 6 years, and then I do it about every 3 or 4 years. And I did it last year, and I hadn't done it since right before the pandemic.
Mhm.
But we used to have top quality artists here, partially because it's right before Plaza, but this time we had artists that this was a huge show for them. And it's like, okay, the quality was down. I didn't mind because I kind of felt like I had less competition. I actually had a better show than I've had there in a long time.
Yeah, that works.
But yeah, you get on this spiral and it's tough to turn it around.
But it's
I'd like
obviously
them,
tough to not get on the spiral too.
I'd like them to fix things because I want to go back because I did well. It's hard to drop out of a show that you didn't do well at, but it comes down to conditions now. Oh, my favorite is, they have volunteers, and I heard from, I'm just a volunteer. It shouldn't matter if you're a volunteer or you get paid. It's a job. There's a job description. You do the job. Be a professional.
Mhm.
And if you don't want to do the job, don't volunteer.
Yeah, exactly. Or
There was a
you know,
there was a volunteer once at Sun Valley who had a grift going, and she was telling people that volunteers get 10% off. So I told the director, and the
yeah,
director got rid of her, because it was bullshit.
yeah.
It's like you live in like the 0.00001%, of places for wealth. I'm not giving you 10% off. Or maybe it was even 20%. I can't remember the percentage, but it was a lie. That's the thing. I mean, the director was mad about that.
There was used to be a Labor Day show in Oklahoma City on the campus of the community college there. And near the end of the show, they would go around and ask for small donations, and the donations were raffled off to the volunteers.
Oh, geez.
And I'd never seen that before.
Wow. That's egregious. That's
Look at. I'm
How about
I'm cursed with having done
giving
shows
to
35
starving
years
artists?
ago.
wait, I can't hear.
Oh, sorry, Barry. I stepped on you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm cursed with having done shows 35 years ago, 30 years ago, when there were 30 really good shows. In fact, shows that are considered really good now, you would call them filler shows, you know. Uh, um, and uh, and now I've watched so many shows just go right downhill,
Mhm.
and adding booze, giving us less, charging more, and the quality's gone down, and therefore sales have gone down. So now there's only maybe 10 that are worth it,
Mhm.
that are really good. And there's there's like way too many artists, good artists, trying to get into those. I never had a problem. If you didn't get into one, you could get into another one. I
Mhm.
want there to be 30 great shows so that I could, most good artists only do 10, 15 shows, So um I want there to be more really good shows, really, really well run shows, so that I can
Mhm.
have more really good shows to do. And the ones that are really good, there's a commonality between
Yeah.
St. Louis and Cherry Creek and Fort Worth and Des Moines to some Des Moines. I mean, there's 10 of them. And it's frustrating
Mhm.
that I can only get into 2 or 3 a year, and I want those are the only ones I want to do, but
Right.
or fill in with
Well,
a Fort Worth.
so with that in mind, that it's impossible for most of us to get into all of those really good shows, um, from the start, I actually, when I was starting out, I did when I got my first studio, I started making sales directly out of the studio, and that's part of
Mhm.
my business model, which I'm relieved about, because again, some years, at least you get into a couple, other years bupkis, and
Yeah.
so I'm always grateful. I had somebody come to the studio because she lost an earring, and um, she wanted to come in and look, and ended up I made a really, really nice sale. And I feel so relieved and grateful for that. You never know when it's going to happen. If you have a show,
Mhm.
at least for the most part, presumably I'll make some sales. But yeah, it's definitely difficult to depend on, because you're right. There are so many good people, so many talented artists, applying for, very few spots in not that many shows. So
Yeah, but there are a lot of artists that I know that may have separate studios, but their studios are at their house. They're not in a retail location. They're not set up somewhere where,
Right.
it's easy for people to visit. Um,
I understand. Yeah.
and having that separate studio space like you have now.
Mhm.
Um,
And I
well,
had
you don't have a separate studio space now, but
it
the
is
space
it
you
is
live now,
right. It's separate though. It's like completely doors locked. It's completely separate.
right?
So
I
Yeah.
mean, same building, but yeah, I mean, that's set up, and like you had um,
In Berkeley.
in Berkeley,
Yeah.
where you had a separate studio, and you were in
Mhm.
with a group of studios, and you could get together and, have open houses and do things like that.
Right.
You know,
And when we moved here, that was also part of the goal. I didn't want to give up, um, having that sort of situation, especially here in Santa Fe where people come here to buy art.
right?
So
But that doesn't. What I'm saying is that doesn't work for everybody.
I
That's not an
understand
option for
that.
a lot of people.
Right. No, that I
Um,
understand. And it's a predicament because, and if you're a jeweler, you don't want people at your house, that's for sure. And but
yeah, yeah.
I'm just saying it's something that I feel very grateful for, and um, and is a situation that I was able to have here in Santa Fe also, because yes, it gets scary. It's like, what if you get into none of those really good shows? I mean, um,
It's
and
happened.
yeah.
Has it happened to
So
you? It's happened
yes,
to
of
me.
course. Yeah.
He,
And
we left out part of this income source that we didn't talk about. Half my business was galleries in those days,
okay.
and every gallery is gone out of business, and that market hasn't returned.
Right.
Well, it has
Yeah.
to, but a lot lower degree. I mean, I have 3 really great galleries, but I used to
Hmm.
have 15 or 20.
Right. Oh yeah. It used to be a whole different. There's a ceramic artist in Western Massachusetts. I don't know if you know who he is. Jack Masson. He's uh
Don't know.
70s and 80s. And anyway, he said that galleries used to have trailers, and they'd come through the area, and they would load up their trailer and give you a big check, and they'd be on their way. And such a different time, and
Hmm.
so yeah, that's, I mean, for me, galleries are certainly not going to buy my work. It would just be consignment. um
Actually, at the ACC shows,
mhm,
Baltimore or even Wendy Rosen, um, there'd be a lot of high-end jewelry, and they would make sales to the
you're right.
specific galleries,
Yeah.
and it was sustainable because a lot of those people, especially the jewelers, they didn't do art fairs. They did all their whole business
Mm,
was galleries. So you
right.
would have
did
sold.
did you know someone, a ceramic artist named Bob Poole? He did ACC wholesale from
No,
Berkeley. Well, I remember he said he used to
but I
do all the
could have.
sales. You could have, I think. He used to do all the sales for the year at ACC, and you could get in for
Yeah,
3 years back then.
yeah,
So,
it was
that,
great. I did it from both sides, so I kind of know
mhm.
this. But
uh,
you'd set up, and then they'd open the doors, and people would run in. There would be a
uh,
line to get in, the buyers,
right,
because you could only, and as a seller, you'd fill up every month, so you knew how much money, how many pieces you would be able to make per month, or be able to deliver, and
uh-huh,
so you do it by dollars, and as soon as you filled up that month, and if you really wanted the work and you were late, you might want the work, the shows was in February. Um, and if you really wanted to work, there were 2 ways to do it. You'd have to get there early enough,
mhm.
because otherwise you go to the booth and, well, we'll deliver in July or August or
Right,
September,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so, and the other way was, because we did this, you'd call the people that you want, whose work you want, and tell
right,
them, we want to spend X amount of dollars in your booth,
hmm,
and save us some, time in, May or whatever. And so that would be the other way to do it. And it was
uh-huh,
great because from both ends, if somebody
right,
called me, they want, I mean,
yeah,
you know, yeah.
yep. I know it's all gone by the wayside. Um, That was before I ever did, ACC and but
Mhm.
um but yeah, we live in very different times now. Um and yeah, excuse me. Sorry. I've
Hey, Court,
heard a lot about the 80s
I'm
and
sorry, go ahead.
how sales were always and how shows were. So I think that's because there was a
80s and 90s.
larger middle class. What do you think?
No, I don't think that was it
No,
at all.
really? Then what was it?
To me, it started when the planes went into the buildings in New York City. The
9/11.
the yeah, the atmosphere, of the country, what's the right word? How people felt just
Mm-hmm.
changed it, and that's when the galleries started going out of business, I
Ah,
think.
interesting.
It started
Huh.
there, but the real kabosh was 2008 with the housing crunch.
Right,
At
right.
least with 2D, well, not just 2D work, and for me, it took about 10 years, 9 years, 8 or 9 years for it to start recovering.
Uh-huh.
People shopping online more, I feel like is a big part of it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, personally, I had a shop up for a while, but only since the pandemic. Like I regularly now make online sales where prior to the pandemic, maybe once a year someone would buy something online.
Mhm.
So, um, but they could still reach us, but how are they going to find us, right? I mean,
Yeah, I worked kind of hard at it. I mean, I was on Etsy starting in around 2007, and I worked at it to get sales and visibility, but I mean, I'm not really on Etsy anymore, but even just now through social media and trying to promote my website and emailing my customers and letting them know that they can buy new work online or whatever. But I
right.
remember galleries were like terrified of that, like way back when
Sure.
Mhm.
we first started wholesaling. They did not want you to have a website.
I remember, and I understand it also,
Hmm.
but unless a gallery is sustaining you, what are you to do? That's the other, paradox to that.
Yeah, right.
The answer to that is you have to sell your work at the same price that they're going to sell your work at,
Yes, yes,
Which
or
I
vice
always
versa.
did.
They have to sell.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I've got to say, I mean, for those who can do it, this kind of studio model that I have is just my whole career has been really nice. I mean, I didn't start out doing shows, but when I was first starting out, I did other work also for money. But just this build up over time, like here in Santa Fe, I don't necessarily have a big audience, but from my customers across the country, they happen to come through here, and um, they seem comfortable enough calling and coming over. They don't all buy from me, but um, and it's I can't say. I mean, I guess I could look at like the year and say how many people actually came to the studio, but it's
Mhm.
again like at a show. Theoretically, when you show up, there's going to be people there. Where this is more of a random
Mhm.
situation, and yet there's a consistency to it over the course when I look up, back 25 years.
Mhm.
Man,
Hey,
there's a problem some artists have, and I happen to be one of them, whose work doesn't translate well online.
Hmm.
mhm.
There's
Yeah.
some artists whose work, you know, Allison, your work looks great online.
Well, actually, I will say just in what you just said, the majority of people who buy from me online have already met me in person.
Well, that's true
So
too. But,
yeah,
you know, you know, people talk about, oh, their website got into the pandemic and all this other stuff. You know, my work does not reproduce well online. And looking at something, unfortunately, on a phone screen compared to a, 20 by 24-inch print, there's a night and day difference.
Mhm.
And, part of what I'm selling are my prints. And you can't show the quality of the print on a phone, or you can't show it on any kind of electronic screen.
Hey, and yet I don't really pay that much attention to online stuff because all the scams and scammers and the phone calls and the rip-off artists. And yet I had my best year ever last year. So, would I do even better if I paid more attention to online? Probably.
So that's really great, but I would say it's also a testament of a long career, no?
Could
No,
be. I
seriously.
don't know.
But there's something to that as well. Like I
Yeah.
think what helped sustain me during the pandemic, those online sales were mostly people who knew me. So,
Mhm.
and I kept sending out my emails and you know, just I mean, I think there is something to say about being around for a while.
Just
Hey,
out of curiosity, Barry, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. What percentage of your sales are to repeat customers and what's to new customers? What do you think?
I'm really glad you asked that because I was
Good
about to
question.
just say that. At least half are repeat customers. I'd
Mhm.
say half. I was
Yeah.
just going to say Ann Arbor is a good example. I wouldn't even do Ann Arbor if I didn't get the same people coming back every year to buy the work.
Isn't that
I,
great? But
it is
and
great.
and
It feels
and it's
really
easier
good.
and it's easier to sell to them because you've already sold to them and you've earned so some of it's about trust also.
Yeah.
That I know when I was starting out, like people want to know you're going to stay in business. And I remember at the show in San Francisco, this woman said, "Do I own your work yet?" And I said, "No." And she bought something. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, why people buy or not. But yeah, the return customers, gotta love them and nurture them.
I don't know, and I haven't talked to a lot of photographers, but I don't find a lot of photographers that have really strong return customers. Wall space is kind of limited. I see painters have return
Mhm.
collectors, and I see them drop $5,000 plus on new paintings.
Mhm.
But I just
Hmm.
and maybe it's different with other photographers, but I just don't see
Right.
a lot of photographers in general having that same kind of repeat business.
Where's
What about
where's
Scanlon?
Oscar?
Oscar's he's in Orlando visiting cousins or something like that.
Oh,
I talked to him. Yeah, but Oscar could get on. He might show up any second now.
because I'd be because his work is different than yours, Court, and so that would be interesting to know.
So anybody else, how much is repeat business part of their sales?
Huge, huge.
Mine is huge. It's huge. Like, I would say, it's pretty rare for me to get, for instance, online, like, even though I, try to stay active on Instagram and, Facebook and everything, I rarely get a new customer online. And at shows, I mean, it kind of just depends on the show. I would say easily half, like no, don't even have to think about that. It's about half. In almost 100% online is return customers.
I had a fun
I don't.
experience before I left. Somebody called me up at the beginning of the week and said, I saw your work at Madison and I wasn't ready to buy, but I redid my inside of my house and I want to buy something. So I said, "Oh, you're in luck. I have all these new pieces I'm taking to Florida. You can have the pick of the litter here." And so I figured he's going to buy one piece. I sent him a bunch of pictures. I shot pictures, and he sends it back. He circled 5 pieces he wanted. Well, the
Ooh,
problem with that is I'm leaving for Florida, so there's no way I don't have the time to pack the stuff and send it to him. So I said, well, you can have the work, but you got to come to Marquette. I didn't think he would. He left Saturday morning. I'm leaving Sunday. He left Saturday morning, drove to Marquette, stayed 20 minutes. I packed up pieces. He paid me in cash, $100 bills, and took off. And it actually paid for my
Wow,
trip before I left for Florida.
that's amazing. That's crazy.
It's great.
that's really cool. So a friend of
Yeah.
mine, she always says never assume they're going to buy one. And like they're buying something and you start writing it up and then they might change their mind. And so that's a good reminder. Congratulations.
Thank you. It
So
was fun.
Madison worked out pretty good then.
Well, if you add that in there, but I'm still not, even though I
I
won an
know.
award and I'm invited back, I'm still not going back.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's right.
sometimes
Hey, wait a minute. Oh, you know why hey guys, you know why I'm not going back? Because Kristen Perkins hounded me forever to come back to Crassel. So to just because of Kristen, I'm not going to Madison. I'm
That's
going to go.
not why.
So Kristen,
Oh, it
you
just made
said, Kristen, you said that most of your online sales are repeat.
Yes.
And it's logical because it's hard to trust the pictures on the website, no matter
Yeah.
how good or bad they are. And so somebody who's bought from you is going to trust your website much more than somebody who never has.
Right. Yeah, I get an
definitely.
email. I get an email from every single person that buys from me. And so, and then I get permission to put them on my email list. So I email my customers. I try not to do it more than once a month. So I'm not constantly emailing them, but certainly when I'm going back to their area or when it's an occasion, to buy something online or there's something new, or maybe I'm having a sale or something like that. But yeah, most of them have seen my work, and I mean, all of them have seen my work in person who I'm emailing.
Yeah. So
So
so the best way to get more people to the website is when you sell it at a show, make sure that they know that the website's there and tell them that work's available for sale there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I always get their email, you know, e- every single time too. Just if not that, just in case something goes wrong with the credit card transaction.
Sure.
Hey, I love the human interaction at the art fair. It's really intoxicating. Anybody else feel that way?
Yes, and I feel like for a while I got tired of art fairs and all the hard work that they were and all the travel. And I thought, I just want to try to sell online and, do social media. But I am so awkward on social media and I feel so much anxiety whenever it's time to think of what to post or a picture to post or whatever, like, and I won't do the videos or the reels or anything like that because I'm not going to be awkward on video. I don't
you
know.
don't
It's hard.
you don't have to do a reel with you in it. The they call them videos, but really you could just take a camera and photograph the piece and move around. And I can't even believe the amount of hits reels get compared to stills. And I was
Yeah.
definitely resistant to them, but they're not really videos. I mean, it's just a picture. I mean, I guess they are because it's moving, but it almost seems silly, but they really get a lot of hits. But I find in the end, really just being your authentic self is the best. Like when I send out my emails, and I also send thank you cards after shows, but I don't make that many sales, so I do a handwritten note if they give me their address.
That's nice.
Otherwise I'll send them a personal email that's not like from my Squarespace emails. And because I feel like then when they get my group email, they might remember who I am. But I also, in my emails, I try to say something personal, like if I went on a beautiful hike and just show them what I saw, or, it depends. But I try to not just put out a generic message of I'm doing this show and that show. Like, I think the last email or a couple ago, I had a photograph of my studio, and I, talked about, how I actually have this period of time where I can work, while leaving everything out, and that kind of thing, just to try to make it more of a story. And it certainly doesn't stop people from unsubscribing, but on the other hand, when I see people at shows, and you never know who's looking at the email. Well, I mean, you can look that up, but a lot of people thank me and enjoy reading the emails. So, I feel like, it's not necessarily an send out an email, people will buy, but they do forget who we are very quickly. And many times where I'm at a show and I see somebody in earrings and I know the artist, and I'll compliment their earrings, and they will never remember who the artist is. So I figure we have to constantly remind them.
They always love how we know. Like, sometimes if I saw someone wearing your work, I would tell them that I knew you, and they love that.
They do, and they're often surprised, or even like recommending someone else. If somebody comes to me at a show and they're looking for something, it's just not my realm, and I know somebody who's perfect for it, I'll recommend someone else, and they're always surprised because it's not like we're kind of waiting to pounce on them to buy something. It's a much nicer community than that. So
yeah.
Barry, I'm with you 100% about really enjoying the personal interaction at the festivals. And part of it is that I have PTSD from 35 years of corporate marketing, and the whole social thing just makes my stomach turn anymore. And I'm like, if I have to spend 2 days of my week doing that, which is, it's almost a full-time job in itself to get any damn good at the whole social media marketing for yourself. I just really rather focus on my art and then, take those opportunities to do the in-person festivals, have the personal interaction. And yes, I still also create the mailing list, and I still send things out when I do open my online store, but I only open it for 2 months a year. And the rest of the time, I don't even bother with all the rest of that, because it's like you're constantly updating the photos, you're constantly updating the quantity. It's just a real pain.
Who's got time for that?
Yeah, exactly. And I really don't. I mean, I know none of us have time for that, but to do it well, because there's so much noise in the online space, to do it well, you've got to really commit a lot of time. And
now, I'm sorry.
No, I've decided to opt out of that. I did it for too long in another space for another world, and it's not rocking my boat anymore, and that's why I got out.
I was going to say, Allison has time for it because she doesn't sleep. She barely eats. This is what she does.
No. I actually enjoy eating very much, and I need my 8 to 9 hours of sleep. A lot of people think I don't sleep, but you call me at 7 in the morning, I'm not picking up.
I'm kidding. I just couldn't resist,
But the thing is, it's not that I like doing all these things. It seems like it's just part of what I have to do. I never got onto Pinterest or anything. I mean, we have to pick and choose, and there's so much that we have to do just running our businesses. So
and Allison, also, unlike you and many of you on this call, in fact, probably all of you on this call, I'm not doing this as a full-time, paying my mortgage kind of thing through this. So, if for me, it is a very delightful pastime that I want to make very, very good with, but I do have I can I can make the mortgage from month to month without a really good month of online sales. So yeah, it's a whole different thing. Right. If it's the bread and butter. I get
There's something else about art shows that I don't think a lot of artists think about. And I've been doing art shows for, 13, 14 years, and it really didn't hit me until late last year that we have an opportunity as artists to do something that a lot of other artists don't have. And that is, we get to sit there for hours, hundreds or thousands of hours, and watch people interact with our work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We get to see what excites them. We get to see, what piece people go to first, what colors, what shapes, what sizes. And, that's an incredible help as an artist to,
Very. Yeah.
to see. And, I talk about my work doesn't translate real well into online because I've got, a lot of my work has very subtle detail in it. And I watch people walk in and kind of stand in the middle of my booth and kind of look around, and one of my photos will catch their eye, and they'll stand there and look at it for a few seconds, and then they'll move about a foot closer to it. They'll take a little step closer to it.
Yeah.
And I'll watch them do that like 3 times because and I can, it shows me which pieces are pulling them in. And then I'll ask them, I'll let them look at it for a while, and I'll ask them, what drew you to this piece? What pulled you in?
Yeah.
But it's really interesting just to see them just get closer and closer to the piece and kind of get deeper and deeper with it.
Yeah, I that's valuable, really valuable information. I mean, in person, I was so glad when in person started up again, because there isn't nothing to replace it. All these other things, support it. I mean, for some people, they have just online businesses, and that's great for them. But yeah, art is, it's emotional for people. It's experiential, and then physical also, depending on what the piece is. So, yeah, very important.
I don't think I really appreciated the art fairs until they came back. And, I don't do as many now as I used to, but I'm in a much better mood at the shows than I used to be. I feel like I was doing so many before, and I'd be in such a
Wait a
bad
minute.
mood. And
When were
now
you in a
that
bad mood?
It's like
How
taking a
long ago?
drug.
I've never seen you in a bad mood. When were you in a bad mood?
Well, when you first met me at Arts Beats and Eats, I was in a bad mood.
No, you weren't. We had such a great time. You, me, and Jim Parker. It was a ball. And Koza.
So she's delightful even when she's in a bad mood. That's a very,
yeah.
very lovely trait, Krista.
I've actually had a crush on her since then, but sadly she won't take the bait.
If Parker and Koza were there, it had to be a good time.
Oh yeah.
They were my booth neighbors. I love them.
Yeah, they were next door. They were right next to you, and I was across from them. And we weren't we texting each other back and forth because it wasn't going that well. So we were commenting on the show.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
I did. I got Parker and Kozo pretty good. A couple years ago at my one and only time for doing Krazel. Parker and I have this thing about Cheez-Its. And it goes back to a show in Webster Groves, Missouri, and they had Cheez-Its in the little snack cart they were bringing around, and Parker took the last bag of them, and I just gave him hell for it. And it's turned into this thing. It's gotten so bad now. I get this box from Parker and Kozo, and I open it up. This was Christmas. Somewhere they found a Cheez-Its Christmas ornament. We'll do a show, and I'll go buy an industrial sized box of Cheez-Its and leave it in his booth. But at Krazel,
funny.
I took a photo of a Cheez-It and had it made into 2 throw pillows. And I got down to their booth, and luckily they were both busy in the tent mahal, and I left them, and they didn't see me.
But
and about half an hour later, a lady came up and wanted to buy them.
Oh boy. What'd you sell them for?
Yeah, it took them a while. It took them a while to recognize what they were, And then once they realized what they were, they knew exactly where they came from.
That's so funny.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Pozo is Jim Parker's wife, and she always comes with him to the shows.
She comes with him to every single show. Every
I
single
know,
one.
and she has her own job. too.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing.
I like her, so I have fun. You know, I like seeing her.
Hmm.
She
You know?
flies in, they do the show, and she flies out, and Parker drives home or drives to the next show or goes and shoots, whatever.
Yeah.
I wonder if that language is going to have to change given our society, like goes and shoots. You know, it took me a second. Oh, photograph, you know.
Well, it already has. It already has,
Pardon?
and I try and avoid it, especially if I'm on social media. I
Mhm.
just I avoid it. And there's actually been discussions among photographers about it, and that is
Yeah.
because of when I worked with Target, I got up so early in the morning. I connected with a whole lot of photographers in England, and it's not an issue over there. And I've actually talked about it on social media with photographers in England. And they've said, you know, it's not an issue here because we don't
Right,
have the same problems you have in the United States.
Right, because they actually have gun control.
But I know a wedding photographer that who was based in Denver, and after Columbine, you know, they went to great lengths to take all that language
Right.
out.
Yeah.
Hey,
So then what is the replacement language? Photographing or making a
Photo.
picture or
Yeah.
Photographing.
Mhm.
So
I think that, you know, I don't know this, but because I've never held a gun, shot a gun, carried a gun, and I certainly don't own one. But I'll bet you there's plenty of people that have guns in their booth that I would never know
Oh,
that.
right.
oh, I'm sure there are. I've seen that's discussions come up on social media a few times.
Yeah.
I always have mace.
You know, and I don't, you know, I have working as an EMT and being around law enforcement officers and, you know, knowing what happens to the human body with adrenaline in an emergency situation.
Mhm.
All these people carrying guns in public are just really scary because they're going to wind up
Yes.
killing somebody else sooner or later.
Yep.
Mhm.
You're right. Everything you just said.
How do you know whether they're somebody who's out to make a name for themselves by killing a lot of people, or they're just somebody that's carrying a gun for, I hesitate to use this word, protection?
You
Well,
don't. Law
Yeah,
yeah,
enforcement
but
doesn't.
yeah, but
In fact,
but they
I
don't need
just
to
read
have the assault rifles though. I mean, that's ridiculous.
But I just read a story about a guy in Florida. He was the president of his condo association. He
Mhm.
had somebody call police. He was a registered gun owner. He had somebody call police because somebody was breaking into his condo. Police showed up. He was standing out in the hallway. They shot him because he
Ugh.
was holding a gun. And, you know, this was like a year ago, and his family's still trying to find out what happened. And the police say, oh, well, it's still under investigation.
Mhm.
But it's common. There was another guy that I think he was a bouncer somewhere and broke something up. And cops show up, and there's a guy with a gun, and they don't ask questions. They just shoot.
Hmm.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
You know, as far as I know, there's only been one shooting at an art fair, and
What
that was
fair?
maybe 3 years ago in California, Northern
Uh,
California, maybe.
where? Northern, you said?
Yeah, I'm not sure where it was, but I know somebody who
Oh.
was there.
Oh, huh. I think about that, by the way, more like not random
Yeah,
shooting,
so do I.
but mass shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Now, there
have
was one on the East Coast about 10 years ago.
what kind of shooting? Like a mass
It-
shooting or
No, just somebody shot a gun off and it caused a stampede, and people ran through and destroyed a lot of artists' booth in the stampede.
uh-huh. Uh,
I always, whenever I set my booth up, at some point during setup, I take a minute or two and look around and figure out the best way to get the hell out of there and what do I have for cover.
Eric and I started doing that, at the local artist market here. I thought about that and I brought it up to the people who run it and they said, well, there's nothing we could do about it anyway. And so I thought, okay, well, we'll just have our own plan.
Everybody should carry a gun.
He's not serious.
No, I'm not serious.
I know too many people that carry guns that have no business with them.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is there's no training required, isn't that right?
It depends. But when there is training, it's usually simply standing in a range, punching holes in paper, which is vastly different than being in a situation where you've got to use your weapon.
But there should be training also on how to care for it, how to, keep it, all of these things.
Some states have that.
How
Yeah,
to
I think
clean,
there's a.
I mean,
how
it
to
seems
clean the
reasonable.
sensor.
I mean, you have to learn, you have to learn how to drive and you have to, read the instructions and then take a test.
Nothing, when it
just-
comes to guns, nothing is reasonable.
No.
Yeah, it's stricter with a car than it is with a gun.
It is.
Hey, it's kind of crazy here in Florida because the traffic's ridiculous. I've never seen it this crowded. And I-75 all the way down, and then you get off and all these highways, all these roads. It's ridiculous. I've never
Is
seen
everyone
it
trying
like
to
this.
is everyone trying to escape the Gestapo?
Apparently.
So here's the thing, I'm flying to Florida and as much as I hate flying, it's idle time, right? So I can just sit and read. And so I subscribe to Mother Jones magazine and I'm thinking, God, are they going to confiscate my magazine? Because it's, left-wing political sort of thing. And,
Nah.
even if all these books that they're banning are legal to read, which they are, and they actually have no right to ban them, it doesn't matter. It's, until it's challenged.
They're not banned, they're just banned from schools.
But those kids could order them off of Amazon. So if a kid brought one of those books to school, then they'd get in trouble, but it's a public school and I don't know. One
The
could
kid would
argue,
probably not get in school for bringing a book to school, but how many kids bring books to school that they're not supposed to bring? I mean,
I
when
wouldn't
I went
know.
to school, I had lots and lots of books I had to carry. I wasn't
Mhm.
way too much to
Mhm.
think about bringing one I didn't need to carry.
Mhm.
Now,
Right.
schools are
But
different than they were when I
Yeah.
went to school, I'm sure, but
yeah.
I doubt that there are very many kids who are going to bring a book to school unless there's some sort of book club after hours.
Right. Well, that would
Well,
be a
you-
reason.
Did you
Well,
never
you don't need a
put a
book.
Playboy in with your other books?
You don't need it. You got your laptop. You just, you can go anywhere. You can look at subversive material. You can look at anything while you're there
That's true.
in study hall or something.
Yeah, but they're not. The books are coming out of public libraries as well as school libraries.
Oh.
There
Seems
was
like
a
a clear
case.
Clear
Yeah.
There's
Violet, yeah.
an instance here where there's a small town in north central Kansas that became home to this conservative Catholic sect that actually split
Mhm.
from the Catholic Church.
Oh,
And it's grown and grown, and basically they control the town.
so
The city
what's their,
council is, all members of the church, and the town gives space at a either rent free or like something ridiculous low, like $1 a month, to the county public library to have space. And it was a big deal because it was time to renew their lease, and the conservative church people in town didn't like some of the books in the public library. And so there's
right.
a big deal over whether or not they were going to renew the lease for the public library in town.
So I'm
Th-
curious
listen-
what their sect is. Do they not like follow the Pope or something like that? Or
I don't know.
Too liberal.
Hmm?
The Pope is
oh, the
too
Pope is too
liberal.
liberal. Right.
This
That's hilarious.
split off
There,
happened in the mid 70s, because I
Mhm.
was going to school at Kansas State in Manhattan, Kansas,
Mhm.
which was about 50 or 60 miles from where the small town was. And I remember it being big in the news then when it happened, and them drawing people to the small town and them splitting from the Catholic Church.
Uh-huh. Well, people don't seem to acknowledge our Constitution because a public library certainly falls under the First Amendment, but unless it's challenged, they can get away with it.
Well, freedom of speech doesn't, government employees don't have the same freedom of speech of private citizens. And libraries as state institutions or town institutions don't have the same rules as federal employees and federal institutions.
Right.
And
It still seems that as a citizen, one would have First Amendment rights, which would cover, freedom of religion and
Well, part of the issue, the reason that they were going to ban it and the way they thought they could get around it was because the books did not meet their community standards.
it doesn't matter. I mean, there have been cases, especially with musicians, with their foul language and the states or whoever challenged them never won those cases because of the First Amendment.
well,
So,
until 70 or 80 years ago, there were all sorts of things that restrictions on book publication, much less library contents. And in the 50s, there was a case on whether a book was smut or not, and whether it could be banned because
mhm.
smutty books were illegal in many, many places. And
Right,
one
but it's
Supreme
how
Court
did,
judge said, I can't define smut, I can just tell it when I see it.
yes,
And
I know that case.
right, but I think he was in favor of the ban. I
Uh-huh.
don't remember that I was a child when that case came up, but
Right.
the quote is very famous, of course.
Yeah.
But community standards are meaningful, and not in the sense that they've changed enormously in favor of freedom over the last century. And there have always been people who have been afraid of other people's freedom. And at this point, there are some people whose freedom I'm afraid of, so I have a little more sympathy to some other people I disagree with.
Wait,
What?
so can you expand upon that? What you mean by that? What people's freedom that you're
And it changes.
The
standards change.
Universities, there's story after story of universities that are actually suppressing speech in the name of anti-racism in the name of anti-Islamophobia. And that is, a change in community standards that appalls me. There was a professor of business at University of Southern California who used a Chinese phrase that sounded too much like the verboten N-word to his class. It was a class on cultural what was it? I don't remember the exact title, but basically it was saying, if you're in international business, you have to understand that there are different standards and different perceptions, and you have to be sensitive to the other cultures you're in. And so he had used this phrase, which he had used in many previous classes, and an African American student complained to the dean that he was offended, and the professor got fired. As far as I'm concerned, the dean should have been fired.
Would it be along the same lines? And maybe it's different, but like if you read books of a certain time, Tom Sawyer, for example, has the N-word in it.
Yeah.
And Huckleberry Finn, the most, with Nigger Jim was the most sympathetic adult in the whole book.
So do you think
it was an anti-racist novel?
Right.
Sorry.
I know every time you say anti, I have to think about it. It's confusing front and backward. But so is that the same sort of thing you're talking about at this university, kind of that?
Well, African Americans have been protesting Huckleberry Finn in being libraries for decades, just because the word's in it.
Right.
And so I'm sure there are people who are protesting To Kill a Mockingbird because the word's in it.
Hey, listen, and yet, if you listen to some of the music today of these black performers, it's way beyond this. What how they characterize women. I mean, yet because they're black, you can't it's given a bye. Ridiculous.
There was a story I heard. It was a teenage girl at age 13. She had a Snapchat message, which was supposedly going to be deleted, where she used the N-word. And the implication by the author was she was actually quoting a rap song. And 3 years later, when she was when she was approaching, had been admitted to college, but was still in high school, and she was actively protesting the death of George Floyd, some African American student who had a copy of that snap published it, and her college withdrew her admission for something, that a 13-year-old girl said that was supposed to be completely private, and if it was a quote, was really completely innocuous. But the word, the magic, negative, horrible word was in it.
It's such a complicated situation. I mean, along the same lines, there's in the craft world, for example, like the word craftsman, or even the ubiquitous "hey guys." Well,
I hear more women saying that than men.
Well, the thing is, when you say that, you're actually leaving out, because there are people who I identify as all kinds of things. So it's not inclusive to say
Except
craftsman.
that 100 years ago, craftsman was inclusive because, sexist or not, all human beings were men, but some human beings were women, and transsexuals weren't even thought of 100 years ago.
So
well,
that's the thing. That's the thing, as we move forward in times, language does change, and I don't know that we, like, all of my craft books from the 70s always are men, but I think it's okay to change the language today. I don't mean to I don't need to burn my books or anything like that, but in thinking about our society today, language does evolve. And so with with books, or from a certain time, I mean, I think you can't change the language of a book because it was written, it defies
there have been many publications of Shakespeare where language was changed for that particular publication.
Was it stated that it was changed, or was it in context of something else?
There were revisions of Shakespeare intended to make them
Sure.
suitable for children and ladies, I think. Because of course ladies wouldn't have possibly known those words, or
Right.
should never be subjected to hearing
Yeah.
them.
Hey,
Oscar, hang up and
watch
drive.
watch a movie from the 1940s, or don't even watch that. Watch an episode of Dick Van Dyke when they're in, each of them are in
Separate
you know,
beds.
if it's a bed scene, they're in
Listen,
their own
that
beds.
Dick Van Dyke was groundbreaking. It was the first television production where a woman had pants on. Mary Tyler
Yeah.
Moore. So
I Love Lucy.
so-
Yeah,
Ricky and
look what
Desi,
happened.
Ricky and Lucy had had single beds, and the Danny
That's
Thomas
right.
show.
Look,
Yeah.
I know.
They weren't
And
allowed
look
to
what
show
happened.
toilets on TV. That's why they didn't show the Brady Bunch's toilet.
Oh,
Is
right.
it-
Alfred Hitchcock. The toilet is Alfred Hitchcock in The Birds. They showed a woman in a bra, and they showed room, and I remember there was this one shot with the drain, and then it came back up on
Yeah,
an eye.
that's a
I
great
think.
scene.
Yeah.
The drain, that was Psycho, the drain.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a
okay.
great
So I'm
scene.
conflating. So wait, it wasn't the bird. The whole thing was Psycho, where they showed the
Yeah.
bathroom
Yeah.
and a woman in her bra.
I'm trying to remember if they showed a toilet then. I mean, I know that I heard that they couldn't show them on TV, so, but maybe
Okay,
they could in
so-
movies. I'm gonna have to watch next time. I
Yeah.
watched it,
Has
though.
anybody ever heard of a mint julep edition of a textbook?
No.
No.
I just read this the last couple days. Textbook publishers, especially like history texts, would edit books specifically for the South,
Oh.
and they would call them the mint julep edition, where they would downplay slavery and certain parts of history.
Oh. Wow.
Oh, until you get to Florida, where that doesn't exist anyway.
Well, yeah, let's rewrite history. Let's make it seem
Right.
that there wasn't any slavery, and everything's wonderful. Hey, listen, it's only allowed if it's Jews. You can say anything you want about Jews, nobody will complain.
Right.
Hey, listen, I stopped in the rest
White
area.
people in general are subjected to a lot more abuse than used to be the case.
But people think that anti-Semitism doesn't exist. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I've had arguments with friends.
Yeah.
And
That's-
you know,
That's so outrageous. It's worse than it ever was, except for the Nazi era. Hey, listen, I stopped at the rest stop on the way down in northern Florida, and I'm sitting there in the John, and it said incinerate or no, cremate all Jews. Somebody had
What?
written that.
Oh my
It
God.
used to they used to write, they'd have some girl's phone number and say you could get a blowjob if you call this number. Now
Oh.
now it's let's cremate the Jews.
right.
You know. They
There
tried
is
that
a-
once.
There's a house I drive by. They had they're on their second Trump flag now. The first one was all got worn out, but they have a big wraparound porch on the front of their house, or a big porch that goes all the way across the front of their house. And they literally have red, white, and they have 3 porch lights. One's red, one's white, one's blue. And they had these series of hand-lettered yard signs that came up right after the 2020 election, and they misspelled president on one of them.
Oh.
Of course. They don't know how to spell. They don't,
Trump is
It
so
would-
out. They haven't heard.
when you have when you dropped out of school at second grade, or maybe flunked out, you don't know how to spell. Hey, Annette Silkwood has a video of this bus that at St. Armand's Circle that went around the circle a few times, that was totally decked out with Trump stuff. And you should show that to the, if you could show that to this
Well,
group, it'd be
the
weird.
Koch brothers are not funding his election in 2024. I was just reading about that today. And you know, Robert Reich, I read a lot, and he keeps talking about what the hell's wrong with Harvard, because DeSantis and Ted Cruz are both from Harvard, and you know, he's saying, well, it's not their fault. You know, what are they teaching them there? Kind of a funny thread.
Right before we moved, I think we moved like 25 years ago. We moved from Kansas City down to outside Wichita, kind of in I call it a semi-rural area. And so we started going to breakfast in this small town cafe. And right before we moved down here, I'd spent about 6 months traveling, doing seminars and flying almost every other week. And we come down here and we're sitting there and we're listening to the people around us talk, and we're listening to them and we're listening to them, and, you know, very redneck, you know, semi-educated sounding. And I started listening to them talk about their jobs. And one Sunday it hit me. Because I was flying short hauls in the United States. I was flying on 737s a lot, Boeing 737s a lot. The people that I was listening to that I thought were not very smart were the same people that built the fuselages on the planes I'd just been flying around the country in.
Yeah.
You know, it was real. You know, you're just sitting there and you just have these thoughts just, and it's like, holy cow, how do these things stay in the air?
Well, maybe they weren't as stupid as you thought.
They're inspected.
No,
They're not inspected.
the actual production jobs in the aircraft industry here require little thinking. Everybody has their job and they do it, and all they need to do is know how to pound rivets or stretch wires or whatever.
Okay. Well, I was a factory foreman 50 years ago, and I was supervising a bunch of uneducated people, but some of them were very wise. Not all of them.
What kind of a factory?
It was a candle factory. My father was a partner in this little company that made candles, and they were a significant chunk of them were sold to Catholic churches for offerings. So people would make a donation, buy a candle, and light the candle, which would burn for a week. I have had a very interesting, complicated career.
But it was really interesting listening to these people talk, and the unions here are very strong. And, you know, you talk to anybody that works in the aircraft industry here, and there's always the story about the guy that comes in and the, you know, union guys pull him aside and say, hey, slow down. You're working too fast. You're working too hard.
Say, Kurt, you started to say something when I mentioned transsexuals.
Yeah. In certain cultures, going back centuries, transsexuals were acknowledged that they existed. Native Americans, you know, have acknowledged transsexuals and multiple genders.
Okay, but
for a
it's
long
not
time.
something I ever heard about till I was a grown-up. And then it was this weird thing that there were these very small number of people who were so weird.
So
now
I grew up outside New York City. It was all normal.
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, and it wasn't normal where I grew up.
Where in Brooklyn?
Flatbush, more or less.
Okay. My mother went, Midwood. My grandmother was on the border of Flatbush and Midwood.
Well, I went to Midwood High.
Okay. My mother went to Midwood High, but she's older than you.
How old is your mother?
She's 81.
Okay, yes, she's older than I am.
Yes.
Well, I'm 71. So
Mhm.
There's an artist that I got to know him because he was neighbors at this one show we did. He was always a neighbor, and it was a show I did for like 3 or 4 years straight. And we got to know him because my wife goes to the Methodist church. We found out that his wife was a Methodist minister. And the last time we saw him, I was really giving him a hard time because his hair was really long. And the next thing I know, he's not him anymore. And
well, let's see, how long ago? About 15 years ago, I was at the Baltimore Antique Show, and there was a man named Joe McDonough who was selling Audubon prints and similar high quality prints. And the next year, nobody was in that booth. There was a different person in the booth, and the year after, there was somebody in that booth selling Audubon prints whose name was J.O. McDonough, who subsequently hired me to build her website,
Mhm.
and was very frank about the transition, and had fathered children and had waited till they were grown-ups before having the transition. And because he thought it would freak them out, I think.
yeah, well, when
she
we
I'm
figured,
sorry, I'm muddling my pronouns, but he thought it would freak them out, so he waited to become the she.
Mhm.
But
yeah, she about the same time she started growing her hair out, she told us that she divorced her wife.
well,
So
the first transsexual, the second transsexual, because I'd heard of Christine Jorgensen, who had been a
Yeah,
transsexual right after the Second World War. But
famous case.
the next one I heard about, James Morris had been on the expedition to go to the top of Mount Everest with Edmund Hillary,
Mhm.
and was a journalist and had lived an extremely adventurous life. And in the late 60s, transitioned from James to Jan, and stayed married. I don't know what the legalities were, but his wife stayed partners with her. And
what's even more amazing is she lives in small town Kansas, and I imagine how difficult it is for her.
mhm.
And unfortunately, when Eric has a high school friend who was married and had kids, and life was very difficult, and when he transitioned to a woman, he lost his family. The wife poisoned the kids and against her, and so on the other hand, she's actually very happy to be who she is, although she misses her kids. And it's been probably 25 years, 30 years or more since the transition. But,
So the kids have the option to communicate with the parent. The mother no longer has any authority over that.
Sure. Right.
And it had to be really tough on her too, because she, I think, was active in her church.
Mm-hmm.
So
in Northampton, Massachusetts, where this is, they actually have a church that welcomes, all sorts of people. So, if people want to go to church, it's nice that they do have a place to go.
There are
some
many
Methodist,
welcoming institutions.
Some Methodist churches are open about that.
Mm-hmm.
Some are not. In fact, the Methodist Church right now, as a national organization, is splitting along those lines because a lot of their overseas members are much more conservative and don't want to tolerate anything LGBTQ plus.
Uh-huh.
Whereas in the United States, it's more accepted. And my wife's noticed it in the 2 or 3 pastors that have gone through her church here, that some are more accepting than others.
Sure.
We currently have a non-binary person on the board of our synagogue.
Hmm.
I don't know that we have any transsexuals in the congregation, but I don't.
Uh-huh.
It's none of my business, and they very well might be. There was a man who attended a few men's club events and had said that he had changed synagogues because of some issue with his son, and that I can't remember specifically what it was, but subsequently he told the men's club that the transition, that the kid, well, that the kid was transsexual, and then he was horrified that he'd admitted it in public and subsequently dropped out of the synagogue. And it was not an issue with any of the men in the men's club, and none of us would have
I just
shared it.
read something on Twitter about a rabbi that was involved in a court case over some transgender issue or a gender-based issue, and said, you know, this is a religious issue for me, and basically said my religion believes in all the genders and that there's multiple genders, and
How
Well,
enlightened.
the spectrum of Judaism is so huge. I have a friend who is ultra Orthodox and who just is completely horrified at the tolerance of transgender in the United States.
Hmm.
He
Right.
says,
I
you know,
mean,
there are
there's
things immutable, and the Torah tells us what they are, and people who are deviating are just wrong. And
yet Israel was the first place to accept gay marriage, and it was the first place to have a pride parade, which lasts a week.
well, I'm sure that's going to change now.
No, that's still up for debate.
I mean, just because of the government now there.
Oh no,
well,
I know exactly what you mean.
the
Oh,
Israeli,
That's
okay.
up
Yeah.
for debate.
if the Israeli government goes too far to the right, there'll be another election in another 6 months. I mean, they've been having elections at ridiculous rates, and the governments have been fluctuating, and the policies have been fluctuating at absurd rates.
Hmm.
Netanyahu took a gamble. He couldn't get elected because it's pretty much 50-50 down the middle. And then you have the 15% Arabs and the 15% Orthodox. So he maybe it's 20% now. So the only way he can get reelected, because he only cares about about getting reelected, about the power, is embrace the ultra Orthodox, and he had to make concessions, but he said, well, it'll never go through what they want. So, but that isn't necessarily the truth. So we'll see what happens. And then there's been all these protests in in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem against that government. So and the laws are trying
Well,
to
the
change. So we'll see.
protests are about trying to modify the rules of the Supreme Court, which actually is illiberally liberal. The Supreme Court has arrogated itself all sorts of powers that it did not have when the nation was founded, and it's making decisions that would never get to the court in the United States. As dysfunctional as Congress is, well, it's all much more complicated than whatever you read in the press. Always.
And you know what? The only reason why Netanyahu wants to, is doing this so that he won't go to jail, because
Very likely.
he accepted bribes or accepted money. He wasn't supposed to. I thought it was kind of petty. So like but
That
there are
sounds so familiar.
hardliners.
That sounds so familiar. That's why Dump wants to run for president, so he won't go to jail.
Well, yeah, there's hard on the left that just won't, they're out to get him. So they can resolve this issue by just saying, okay, fine, let him have his gifts or whatever he got, whatever his wife got, you know. Let him go off into the Negev and be not heard from ever again.
The big thing in England recently was that Boris Johnson was having to go out and borrow money from somebody for something.
Well, he can't borrow from Trump because Trump can't get any money from any of the banks.
But Trump is still effectively raising money from poor people.
That's just so tragic. It's so
he raised
tragic.
all sorts of money for the 2022 election that he kept. It was supposed to go to support candidates, and he didn't support them.
By the way, he's, quote, running in 2024, but why would he have to run if he still thinks he's president?
Because it's a new election, even if he's president.
Well, the last I looked, he isn't president.
But he claims he is.
If he's still president, he could not legally run in 2024.
That's true.
Oh, right.
His
so
2 terms are up.
Either way, it's
logic has absolutely nothing to do with Trump.
There you go. So what I'll be curious about is like the National Gallery, there's the portraits and things like that. I mean, but that's usually raised by private money, and he has no interest in that. So historically, going through some of those museums will be very interesting, say, I don't know, 10 years from now or so.
Do you think there will not be a portrait of Trump?
So
there will be.
Well, but the thing is, they raise their own money for it, and there's nothing in it for him, really. So that's why I think there won't be, and I can't imagine I could be wrong on that, but I can't imagine there's going to be a presidential library. That again, like, what does it serve him? And if there is a presidential library, I'll charge a lot of money to get into it.
Well, somebody might actually create a presidential library for his administration after he dies, which would be appropriate because presidential libraries are basically historical archives with a tourist attraction aspect to it.
Yeah.
And there should be, a historical archive for the Trump administration.
As long as it was factual. I mean,
it doesn't have to be. Who cares?
The archive is the documents, right? And whether there are lies in the documents or not, there are undoubtedly lies in the documents of most presidents.
Well, yeah, but he stole all the documents. I mean, no, I'm joking, but well, it'll be interesting to see.
Hey, DeSantis is going to be president anyway, so Trump doesn't have a chance.
Don't even say it.
I couldn't resist, because I'm in Florida, so.
Right.
I have a guy I went to college with, was Obama's, was the presidential photographer. Pete Souza was the presidential photographer for Obama, and
there was a documentary about his work.
Yeah, and I don't remember he was I forget which. He was also the photographer for another president as well, a Republican president.
Probably Bush, the second Bush, most likely.
No, there was a gap in between.
Really?
He didn't stay on.
Well, we had Reagan and Bush, then we had Clinton, then we had Bush, then we had Obama. So he was
Bush Senior.
Bush Senior? That's a long gap.
Yeah. I have to go back and research. I forget. But
Well, everybody, I'm going to say goodbye for the day. See most of you next week, I'm sure.
So long.
Hi, I'm gonna go too.
Yeah, it's been an hour and a half. It's past my
But
bedtime.
wasn't there something we wanted to ask Oscar though?
Oscar,
Tell me,
how much of your business is to repeat customers? What percentage?
at the art shows,
Yeah,
probably 10%.
Oh, a small percentage. Okay.
yeah, we were talking about that
10%.
earlier.
It's really low. Most of my repeat, I always get new customers. Once they buy piece, they usually is for a particular space, and because they are big, they don't buy that much. It's really few people that come back and buy. They buy small prints, no big prints. So it will be for Nuco, something small, but nothing to brag about.
Yep.
Interesting.
We were talking about that. We were talking about that earlier. So,
Okay.
and I'd said that I thought that photographers for the most part had a lower percentage of repeat customers than other mediums. So
What
Yeah,
about
that's
Scanlon?
about right.
I know it'd be interesting to see what somebody like Scanlon, what his repeat business is.
Scanlon is different. Like, Scanlon is almost 75% for what I know. He does get a lot of repeat business. I do get a lot of people coming back telling me that they love the piece, but they don't buy anything. They just stop by to say hi. So because part of the process of me selling the stuff, I'm trying to be a friend with them more than just I just don't want to just sell you the piece. So
Hey,
I got a
Oscar,
lot of
that'll change.
people that stop by. You think
Now
so?
that you're getting into the better shows, that's going to change. You'll start getting repeat business.
I hope so. I don't know, it's
I
coming.
guarantee it.
How you end doing in Fort Myers?
I did half my
Hi,
business
Mary.
in the last hour. I did. I
Okay.
had a great last hour, so I pulled it out.
That's
I didn't.
stressful.
You did.
Oh,
See, what's funny about that is usually I'd be stressed, but I think I'm going to sell everything at Coconut Grove, so I don't care what happens before that, as long as I don't lose money. So if I make some money or if I do fairly well, that's okay,
When is Coconut Grove?
even 2 weeks from
Yeah,
now.
I'm going back.
All right,
Even
I'm out
if there
of
was
folks.
what?
Hey, we all should be out of here.
I got to go cook dinner and get ready for my Zoom in a little while.
Thanks,
Okay,
Larry.
I just wanted to stop by
All
and
right.
see how you guys are doing. Be good.
Bye.
It
Bye.
was fun.
Bye. Oh,
Yeah.
Larry, I just wanted to say, oh wait,
What? Allison, you froze. Allison. Okay, you're moving.
oh, I could hear you. I just wanted to, you had, I can't remember if you said it or you posted about buying backup equipment. Because what you use isn't made anymore.
Right.
And, and so I mentioned that to Eric because he has Novatron, and the last time he photographed it didn't fire, and then it did work. But he looked up Novatron and found a bunch of those, whatever those square
Power packs.
boxes are called. I don't know.
They're power packs and then they're heads. They're separate. Right? You're freezing.
And he found them 200.
Allison, you're breaking up.
Really? Okay. All right. We'll talk about it next time. Because I don't know what's happening. So
All right.
All right. Take care.
Bye.